Guys, and welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about security policies rules. In this video we are going to cover what is cleanup rule, what is stealth rule, what do we mean by explicit rules, what do we mean by control connections, and what do we mean by IB spoofing. So this is very important to understand how and why they call it this term specifically in a different way. So let's begin with cleanup rule. Let me write. Gateway follows the principle that which is not expressly permitted is prohibited. So whenever you newly configure your gateway, you will see everything is by default dropped. So the security gateway drops all communication attempts that do not match a particular rule. The only way to monitor the drop packet is to create a cleanup rule that logs all drop traffic. So the important aspect of cleanup rule is to monitor drop traffic. The cleanup rule, also known as none of the above rule, it drops all communication not described by any other rules and allow you to specify logging for everything being dropped by this rule. In the lab, we will going to see where we place the cleanup rule and how we can log that traffic. So whatever the traffic is getting dropped is going to be observed by the administrator. Then there is stealth rule. To prevent any user from connecting directly to the gateway, you need to add a stealth rule to your rule base. Protecting the gateway in this manner makes the gateway transparent to the network. The gateway becomes invisible to the user on the network. In most cases, the stealth rule should be placed above all other rules. Placing the stealth rule at the top of rule base protect your gateway from port scanning, spoofing, and other type of direct attacks. Connections that need to be made directly to the gateway, such as client authentication, encryption, and content vectoring protocol, we call it CVP rules, always go above the stealth rule. So stealth rule gives you your gateway the transparent thing so that the end user not seeing where it's your gateway. Then there is implicit and explicit rules. The security gateway creates a rule base by translating the security policy into a collection of individual rules. The security gateway creates implicit rules which is derived from the global properties, and the explicit rules which creates generally by the administrator in a smart dashboard. Basically, implicit rules are defined by the security gateway to allow certain connections to and from the gateway. The gateway enforces two types of implicit rules that enable the control connections, outgoing packets. We're going to see in a bit. Before that, let's talk about the explicit rules. And explicit rules created by the administrator in a smart dashboard, and explicit rules in a rule that you create in a rule base is something by the administrator. Explicit rules are displayed together with implicit rules in the correct sequence when you select view implied rules. So basically the implicit rules also called implied rules. To see how properties and rules interact, we need to select implicit rules from the view menu, which we're going to see during the lab. Implicit rules appears without numbering and explicit rules appear with numbering. That is one of the difference we can observe. Now in implicit rules, the gateway enforces two types of implicit rules that enable the control connection and outgoing packets. So let's talk about the control connection. The security gateway create a group of implicit rules that it places first, last, or before last in the implicit defined rule base. These first implicit rules are based on the accept control connection setting on the global property windows. The communication, the gateway anticipates other possible connection related to the gateway communication and create implicit rules for those scenarios. There are three types of control connections defined by the default rules. One, gateway specific traffic that facilitates functionality such as login, management, and key exchange. Two, acceptance of internet key exchange, IKE, and RDP traffic for communication and encryption purpose. And number three, communication with the various types of servers such as Radius, CVP, UFP, TACAX, LDAP, and logical servers, even if the servers are not specifically defined resources in your security policy. Implied rules or implicit rules are generated in a rule base through global properties. We need to check the property enforced in the firewall implied rule to see how these rules are positioned, like first, before last, or last. And the outgoing packets communication is something related to how the traffic by default process from the inside to the outside. We don't require a specific rule for that. Now let's talk about detecting IB spoofing. So spoofing is a technique where an intruder attempts to gain unauthorized access by altering a packet's IP address. This alteration makes it appear as though the packet is originated in the part of network with higher access privilege. The security gateway has sophisticated anti-spoofing feature that detects such packets by requiring that interface on which a packet enters the gateway correspond to the IP address. So basically the anti-spoofing verifies that the packets are coming from and going to the correct interface on a gateway. Anti-spoofing confirms that the packets claiming to be from the internal network are actually coming from the internal network interface. It also verifies that once a packet is routed, it is going through the proper interface. For anti-spoofing to be most effective, it should be configured on all gateway interfaces. If anti-spoofing is implemented on a specific interface, spoof tracking for that interface should also be defined. This will help with intrusion detection and troubleshooting. To activate anti-spoofing, configure the firewall interface properties. We're going to see that in lab. The topology tab of the interface properties windows allow you to configure the anti-spoofing property of the gateway. Same we're going to see on the lab. So I hope guys you are able to grasp the basics of the security policy, which is critical. Rest of the things we're going to see on a lab. So thanks for watching this video guys, and have a wonderful day.